The words cut through the warm evening air like shattered glass, slicing through laughter and conversation with brutal precision. The dining room fell silent so suddenly that the clatter of forks against plates seemed to echo endlessly. Every eye at the long mahogany table swung toward me, and I felt the weight of their stares like physical blows. My throat burned with unshed tears, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. My mother, Linda, sat back in her chair with a satisfied smirk playing at her lips, the same expression she'd worn when delivering the perfect insult. My sister Haley hid her grin behind a champagne glass, while my father shifted uncomfortably in his seat but said nothing. As always, I gripped the edge of my chair so tightly that my knuckles went white. The wood felt solid beneath my fingers, grounding me as the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Then maybe I shouldn't be here, I said evenly, forcing my voice not to crack. I pushed my chair back slowly, the scrape of wood against floor echoing. In the suddenly suffocating room, heavier than thunder, no one stopped me. Not one person said a word. The silence was louder than any insult. I walked out, each step feeling like it weighed 100 pounds, but I kept my head high. Behind me, the dining room erupted again with laughter, whispers, and clinking glasses, as if my existence could be erased in seconds. But what they didn't notice was the one person who didn't laugh. My grandfather, Henry Donovan, the oldest at that table, watched me with sharp blue eyes as I disappeared down the hallway. He carried himself like a man still in command of every room he entered. Despite his advanced age, 5 minutes later, I heard the familiar shuffle of his cane behind me on the stone path outside. "Emily," his voice called, low but steady. "Don't let them see you cry." I turned, biting my lip, but the tears betrayed me anyway. "Grandpa," she humiliated me in front of everyone. "My own mother." My voice broke on the last word. He stepped closer, placing a surprisingly firm hand on my shoulder. "Do you think I don't know what she's doing? Do you think I haven't watched the way she and your sister have tried to push you out?" I froze, barely daring to hope. "You noticed?" His jaw tightened. "I notice everything. And tonight they've made a mistake they won't come back from." His eyes glinted with something dark, something dangerous. "Now wipe your face. Let me handle this." Before I could respond, he turned and walked back into the dining room alone. The door shut behind him with a final thud, leaving me trembling on the porch. The next sound I heard wasn't laughter. It was silence, thick, suffocating, stunned silence. And when I dared to peek back through the window, every single face at that table had fallen pale, eyes wide, as my grandfather stood at the head of the table, saying words I couldn't hear. But whatever he said, it changed everything. The silence inside that dining room was almost suffocating, the kind that presses against your chest until it's hard to breathe. And even though I was outside on the porch, I felt it through the walls. The weight of a truth dropped like a stone into a calm lake, sending ripples across every smug face that just moments ago had been laughing at me. My grandfather, Henry, stood at the head of the table, with his cane pressed against the floor, his voice steady but sharp as steel, cutting through the still air. "Shame on all of you," he began, his eyes sweeping across the table, pinning each of them where they sat, and no one dared to move. My mother's smirk faltered. My sister's champagne glass trembled slightly in her hand, and my father shifted uncomfortably, caught between the loyalty he had never given me and the power of his father's words. "Do you even understand what you've just done? You humiliated my granddaughter in front of this family. And for what? To stroke your own egos? To pretend she is less than you?" His cane slammed once against the wood floor, the sound reverberating, making even the youngest cousins jump. "Let me tell you something none of you seem to know. Or perhaps you conveniently forgot. Emily is the only one in this family who stood by me when I was in the hospital last year. She was the one who sat with me through nights when my heart refused to settle, when my breathing turned shallow, when I thought I would close my eyes for the last time. Not Linda, not Haley, not any of you who call yourselves family. It was Emily who stayed." His voice cracked slightly, but his anger only burned brighter, his hands trembling with force as he pointed directly at my mother. "You think you have the right to say she doesn't belong at this table? Let me make something clear. Without her, this table wouldn't even exist because she's the only one who cared enough to be here when it mattered." I watched from the window, my chest tightening, tears streaming unchecked as his words fell like hammer blows, each one shattering the false pride and poisoned laughter that had filled that room only minutes before. My mother tried to speak, stuttering, "Dad, you don't understand," but he cut her off, slamming his cane again, eyes blazing. "I understand more than you think. I've seen your cruelty, Linda. The way you and Haley whisper behind her back. The way you've made her feel small every chance you get. And I stayed quiet longer than I should have. But tonight, I will not stay quiet. You've made her an outsider in her own family, and I will not forgive it." The room sat frozen, no one daring to meet his eyes. And then his next words dropped. Like a thunderclap. "Since you seem so certain Emily doesn't belong, let me tell you where she does belong. She belongs to me. She is my heir. Everything I've worked for, every piece of this family's wealth, every business share, every property. It all goes to her. Not to you. Not to Haley. Not to anyone else sitting here who thought mocking her made you superior. She is the one I trust to carry my legacy." Gasps filled the room. Haley's glass slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor. My father's face drained of color, and my mother's lips parted in disbelief as though the ground had been ripped. From beneath her, the cousins looked at each other in panic, realizing the balance of power had shifted in an instant, and the same people who had laughed when I left the table now sat pale and trembling, stripped of their arrogance. "If she doesn't sit at this table, then none of you deserve to sit here either," Grandpa continued, his voice low but dangerous, each word deliberate. "Emily will choose who stays in this family and who doesn't, because I've seen your true faces tonight, and you should all be ashamed." He turned sharply, his cane tapping against the floor as he walked away, and the sound of his footsteps echoed louder than the silence left behind. When the door opened again, and he stepped back onto the porch alone, his expression was hard, but his eyes softened when they landed on me. "It's done," he said simply, his hand brushing my shoulder in a rare show of tenderness. "Let them sit in their own shame." I swallowed, unable to find words, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Inside, the family that had once laughed at me now sat in stunned silence, their faces drained of smugness, their pride shattered, each of them realizing they had underestimated me. And worse, underestimated the man who had just placed everything in my hands. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl they whispered about behind my back, the outsider sitting quietly at the corner of the table. I was the one they feared, the one they'd have to answer to, and the satisfaction that rolled through me as I heard the faint murmur of panic rising from behind the closed doors was unlike anything I had ever felt before.